Alright, we are live, ladies and germs. And wow. The Russian Grand Prix this morning was absolute insanity. And we also saw a historic moment in Formula One with Lewis Hamilton finally notching his 100th Grand Prix victory and becoming Formula One's first ever Centurion. And Lando Norris. Got a feel for him, and for McLaren, looked like they were on their way to another trip to the top of the podium, and Mother Nature decided to say otherwise. So, a lot to go over in this race, so let's get into it. This is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packerman, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel, where today we are going to be reviewing the 2021 Russian Grand Prix, which took place at the Sochi Autodrome. They're going to be at that track for a few more years, and then they're going to be moving to a new circuit that's being constructed in St. Petersburg for the Russian Grand Prix. This was our 115th. This is our 115th edition of the Fuel. Title of this episode: Fate is a Cruel Mistress. My hair, man. Jeez. Look like an anime character. Need to get it cut. But anyways, yeah, what a crazy Grand Prix this was. I mean, after the last three races in Formula One were either a complete and total farce, see the Belgian Grand Prix, or complete fucking bore fests, see the last two races. This one actually gave us one hell of a show, much to my surprise. And we all figured it was going to be a Mercedes win fest. You know, it's going to be all Mercedes all the time, considering their past history. And while that ended up being the case with Lewis Hamilton getting the win, which we'll get to that right now, Lewis Hamilton is a Centurion. He becomes the first driver ever to score 100 wins. But I tell you what, it was not easy, because as we're going to be getting into, he had to go through so much shit today in order to get that 100th victory, from a poor start to being caught in a Drs Train, trying to run down Lando Norris, and then the weather playing a factor. It was just absolute insanity in this race. But Lewis Hamilton was able to persevere and notch his 100th career victory. First driver in history with 100 F1 wins. You know, I think about, you know, all the motorsports that are recognized around the world. And there are not very many occasions in the history of auto racing where a driver has scored more than 100 wins in a sports premier series. I mean, I can count on one hand, to my knowledge, all the drivers who have scored more than 100 wins in their respective discipline. I'm pretty sure there's more, but based on the ones that I am familiar with, you look at NASCAR, for instance, the NASCAR Cup Series as it's known today. There are two drivers in its entire history who have scored more than 100 wins. Of course, the King, Richard Petty, who has 200 career wins. Then you look at the Silver Fox, the late David Pearson, who scored 105 wins, despite being on mostly a part-time schedule throughout his entire career. he only ran a full-time schedule 3 times, meaning he only ran the full season 3 times in his entire career. And just to give you an idea how good he was, all 3 of those times, he won the championship. Yeah. And then, as much as people malign it, you look at Kyle Busch in the Xfinity Series, who I believe he has like 102 wins in the Xfinity Series, I believe. Let me double check that just to be sure. He's over 100 now, I know that for certain. But I believe the official number right now is 102. Hard to believe he's 36 years old now. Cup Series, he has 59 wins. Xfinity, yes, he has 102 career wins in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And then you look at Lewis Hamilton and what he's been able to accomplish. The closest that anybody had come to cracking the century mark in Formula One was, of course, Michael Schumacher, when he ended up with 91 career wins, which was the record at the time. But then he unexpectedly retired in 2006, and that was the high water mark for many, many years. For 14 years, that was the high water mark. And then last year, Lewis Hamilton came along and completely obliterated that record. And he ended last year with 95 career wins. So it was at that point we kind of realized it was not a matter of if he reached 100. It was just a matter of when and where. Now, obviously, he would have loved to have done it at the British Grand Prix. He probably would have done so had he not locked the tires up at Baku, because I think he would have had that one in the bag. But it is what it is. But he managed to score his 100th career win today on September the 26th, 2021. This will be a day that will live in Formula One history, because it marks the first time in the sport's 71-year history. The Formula One Drivers' World Championship has been around since 1950. This is the first time ever that a driver has ever cracked the century mark in career wins. Hamilton already cracked the century mark in career poles, but it had never been done in career wins, which is obviously the end goal. And while Max Verstappen, who put in an incredible performance in and of himself to come from the back of the grid to finish second, he may end up winning the World Championship this year. And you know what? If he does so, good on him, because to outduel someone like Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time champion, trying to go for a world record 8th championship is a pretty damn amazing feat. But at the end of the day, the biggest accomplishment I think that's going to ever come out of Formula One in 2021 is Lewis Hamilton finally becoming a Centurion. It had never been done before, and some say, well, will it ever happen again? Well, when you look at Max Verstappen, he started racing in Formula One at the age of 17. I think he's only like 23, 24, and he's already got, I think, like 14 career wins at this point. And he's still a very young driver. And once Hamilton retires, he did sign a 2-year contract extension, so he's going to be in Formula One for at least 2 more seasons. But yeah, Verstappen is only 23. He actually turns 24 on September the 30th. He has 17 wins, so he's actually a little bit further along than that. 17 career wins, and he's only 23 years of age. It's unbelievable. Of course, the youngest ever driver to win a Formula One race at the age of 18 in 2016, which is just unbelievable. So this guy has a lot of years in front of him. If there's someone who could perhaps challenge Lewis Hamilton's record for all-time career wins, It's Max Verstappen. He already has 17 wins and he's only 23. But even if Verstappen is able to overhaul Lewis in career wins, which is a possibility considering how many wins Verstappen already has and how young he is, there will never be another first. And whether you love Lewis Hamilton or whether you hate him, whether you cheer for him or whether you boo him, you cannot deny the fact that today was an historic day of epic proportions, because this is something we had never seen before in Formula One, and we probably won't see it again for a long time to come. Nobody else is even close right now to eclipsing the century mark in career wins. Nobody's even close to matching what Hamilton has done. So the next time we see this, maybe years on down the line, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe never again. Maybe never again in our lifetime. You never know in motorsports. So to be able to witness something like this it's unreal. It's absolutely unreal. But all the shit that he had to go through to get to that point was amazing in and of itself. So let's go ahead and get into this race review. Total laps for this race was the same as the Italian Grand Prix, 53 laps. But like I said in the previous review from last night, Max Verstappen had to start from the rear of the field due to changing the power unit, but Valtteri Bottas also had to start from the back after changing his power unit as well. And there was a report of rain in the area. It was basically staying off in the ocean, at least for the time being, but trust me, it would play a factor by the time the end of this race rolled around. So at the beginning of the race, Verstappen reported that his battery was draining under pacing, but I guess it was just a temporary glitch, because then he came on the radio and said, yeah, it's all good now. So Lando Norris starts from the pole, his first career pole, by the way. But Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari got a better start and managed to get the lead on the start, as Hamilton did not get a good start because he was kind of boxed in, and that resulted in him dropping back to the 7th position from 4th. So yeah, he was kind of in a hole right at the beginning of the race. And Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin was up to 4th. Hamilton was able to get by Alonso for 6th. Then we had a battle for 3rd between Russell, Stroll, Ricciardo, and Hamilton. But this resulted in what is known as a DRS train. They were basically all so close to each other that they were all getting DRS from each other. And when you have a DRS train like that, it makes it nearly impossible to pass, which is kind of a problem, obviously. Lando Norris starts closing in on Sainz for the race lead and begins challenging on lap 11. Lance Stroll was the first to pit on lap 13, and it was at this point that the announcers were like, man, why didn't they bring Hamilton in at that point? Because the undercut at Sochi is extremely powerful, unlike at Monza. But Mercedes decided to leave Hamilton out there because he started on the mediums. There were a few drivers that were starting on the hards, and they seemed to be having, a better time of it because the mediums would grain quite a bit. It would eventually clear up, but for a while the mediums were not exactly the hot ticket. But it was pretty obvious that Mercedes, they knew what the fuck they were doing. I mean, they were going to do a one-stop strategy. At least that was the initial thing they were going to do. Start on the mediums, then go to the hards, which was the preferred tire in this case. But then Lando Norris managed to get by Carlos Sainz for the race lead for a first pure lead change on lap 13. So Norris back out in front. Verstappen up to the top 10 on lap 14, so he was coming through the field. Drizzle is being reported in the pit lane at this point, but it was not very heavy at all. Daniel Ricciardo has a slow stop. Hamilton comes in for his stop, as well as Verstappen. Hamilton, both of them have a good stop, as a matter of fact. Norris pits from the lead on lap 29. Hamilton gets by Sainz for 6th on lap 30, and then gets by Pierre Gasly for 5th. On those hard compound tires, Hamilton was later laying down some heaters. Like, he was laying them down lap after lap. Mick Schumacher retires on lap 34 due to a mechanical issue. All cars were running by that point in the race, so he was the first retirement. Norris gets by Leclerc for 3rd as Perez, Alonso, and Leclerc have yet to pit for their first stop. Then eventually they did make their stops, which left Hamilton and Norris all alone at the front. So, you know, the announcers were like, man, why didn't they bring Hamilton in? Well, they left him out there, came in for the hards, and now it was just him and Lando at the front of the field, and everybody else was 20 some odd seconds back. And everybody else was just not gaining on them whatsoever. So, Mercedes had definitely gotten the call right in this case, and they would get the call right again later on. But then Hamilton started closing down on Norris for the race lead. He was about 8 seconds back after the pit stops, then he got down to 4, and eventually he was starting to get it down between 1 and 2 seconds, and trying to get it down under a second to get that DRS. Alonso actually managed to get by Verstappen for 6th, so Verstappen, who had started on the hards, but then had to switch to the medium compound tires because you have to use two different sets during a race. Verstappen was starting to struggle on those mediums, so it was looking like a big points day for Hamilton. Obviously it still was because he regained the point lead, but it could have been a lot worse for Verstappen. Rain was still a potential factor in this race. It was not quite over the track yet, as we were getting closer and closer to the end. Perez gets by Ricciardo for 4th in turn 14. Then it starts to spit with 8 laps to go, and then the rain starts working its way over the track. Lando and Hamilton start slipping and sliding in turn 5, but the rest of the track was still pretty dry for the most part. Perez gets by Sainz for 3rd, and it's looking like it's going to be a great battle between Hamilton and Lando for this race win. Then all hell breaks loose as the skies completely open up and completely douse the Sochi Autodrome. I cannot believe how quickly that track got soaked. Like, it was insane how fast that track got wet. And it was at this point everybody was screaming, we need to come in for tires, we need to come in for intermediates. Hamilton and Lando Norris did not want to come in. They felt like they could probably stay out there on the dries, but Mercedes, being as savvy as they are, they were telling Hamilton, look, the rain's going to get worse. We need to come in for, at the very least, intermediates, which was a risk, no doubt about it. But he could come in because he had such a gap to 3rd place behind him. I mean, I think they were like 40 seconds up on 3rd place at that point, that they could come in, get the intermediate tires, and still come out in 2nd place. Assuming that Lando also decided to come in. Oh, but this is where McLaren made the mistake of keeping Lando Norris out there on the racetrack. They should have called him in. Hamilton comes in, gets the intermediates. Lando decides to stay out and try to gut it out on the dries, thinking that it was not going to rain all that much. Craziness at the end of this race. But then you could see it. I mean, it got to the point where there was spray. Within 2 laps of it starting to rain, there was spray coming off of the cars. That's how fast that track got wet. And Lando Norris on those dry weather tires, on the hard compound tires, was a sitting duck. I mean, he was, his goose was cooked. He made the decision to stay out. He and McLaren made the decision to stay out, and it would ultimately not only cost him the win, it cost him a podium finish, because he tried to stay out on a wet racetrack on slick tires, and it would end up costing him everything. Hamilton on the intermediates came out 20 some odd seconds back, but he quickly ate that gap up as Lando was absolutely struggling in the wet conditions on dry tires. And Norris actually ended up sliding off at a sharp right-hand turn. And Hamilton takes the lead for our second pure lead change on lap 51. Oh, man. You gotta feel gutted for Lando Norris. And in fact, that was actually trending on Twitter earlier. Gutted for Lando, because there is no question that Lando Norris deserved to win this race. He led a shit ton of laps in this race. Was holding Hamilton at bay very well, and he absolutely deserved to get his first career win on this day. But Mother Nature was like, fuck that. It's not your time yet. That just sucks, man. I think his time will come, because he's just been absolutely stellar behind the wheel of that McLaren this year. I mean, he's had quite a few podiums this year. Of course, finished runner-up at the Italian Grand Prix 2 weeks ago. And he got his first career pole in this race, and was on his way to his first Grand Prix victory. It would have been nice to see another first-time winner. Of course, we saw Esteban Ocon win earlier this year at Hungary. So it would have been nice to see yet another first-time winner in Formula One. It just wasn't meant to be, unfortunately, because weather decided to play a factor in this race right at the end, and it turned this race into an absolute chaos fest. And in fact, there were several other drivers that tried to stay on the dry tires as well, and this ended up propelling Max Verstappen, who had pitted for intermediates, all the way up to second. This guy started dead last on the field after having to change his power unit, and manages to gut out a runner-up finish. You know, this was basically going to be a race of damage control, and now it seems like they're going to have an advantage for the rest of the season, with Verstappen managing to get a runner-up finish behind Hamilton. It's like, it doesn't seem to matter what the hell happens. Hamilton and Verstappen just cannot get away from each other. It's absolute insanity how this championship has played out. And yes, I said that the last 3 races were, for one reason or another, absolute garbage. This race was definitely not that. It was craziness. Absolute insanity, and I was on the edge of my seat for pretty much most of it, because it was just absolutely crazy. Carlos Sainz was promoted up to 3rd position, and Lewis Hamilton basically had a lead of over a minute, because with everybody else having all their issues, Hamilton had clear sailing the rest of the way. He won by like 50 some odd seconds. I can't remember what the exact gap was, but Lewis Hamilton finally gets his 100th F1 victory. And even if he doesn't win his 8th championship, this is going to be one of those milestones that's going to be remembered for all time, because of how significant it is. I mean, we may never see someone crack 100 wins again. Nobody else, like I said before, nobody else is even close right now. Max Verstappen definitely seems to have the best shot, considering he's a very young driver. He already has 17 wins. I think he has the best shot to become the next driver to crack the century mark, but that's going to be years down the line. And I mean, it's something that we're probably not going to see for a long while, again, in Formula One. And something we may never see again at Formula One. You never know in motorsports. But Verstappen ends up second, and Carlos Sainz, after, of course, getting that brilliant start at the beginning, looked like it was just going to be a top 5 finish for him, but ends up on the podium. Gets another podium for Ferrari. Of course, we would love to have won the race too, to get Ferrari back in victory lane, but they'll definitely take a podium finish any day of the week. Alright, so let's do some statistics. We had 5 overall lead changes. So, in the last 2 races, we've had 11 overall lead changes, which for Formula One is not bad. Not bad whatsoever. 2 pure lead changes in this race. 0 safety cars. No safety cars in this race. And despite the fact that we had that craziness at the end with the rain, no safety cars. It went clean and green from light to checkered. And you know me, I love myself a caution-free race. Alright, so race results for the 2021 Russian Grand Prix. Of course, Hamilton with his 100th career win. Max Verstappen coming home in the runner-up spot after starting from dead last on the grid. Just an absolute incredible drive by him. Carlos Sainz coming home in third. Daniel Ricciardo in fourth. Valtteri Bottas also started at the back of the field. Didn't look like he was going to score any points whatsoever. And then the craziness of the last couple laps propelled him to a top 5 finish. Fernando Alonso scores a 6th place finish for Alpine. Lando Norris, potential win to 7th. And he might also have a penalty coming his way because he actually was trying to come into the pit lane to try to change the tires, cross the pit lane line, and then came back in, which according to the rules you're not allowed to do that for safety reasons. But I mean, he can't stay out there another lap. You just can't. I mean, on those dry tires on that wet of a racetrack, I mean, that's a safety hazard in and of itself. I mean, so what else is he supposed to do? So I don't know what the FIA is going to do. I mean, I would think, considering the circumstances, they'll probably cut him a little bit of slack. I mean, because he had to change off the dry weather tires. I mean, he had no choice in the matter. So there's that. Kimi Räikkönen scores some points for Alfa Romeo, coming home in the 8th position. Sergio Perez, 9th position in the Red Bull. Probably not the finishing position he was hoping for. And George Russell qualified in the 3rd position. I'm pretty sure he would have liked a better finish, but a 10th place finish. He scores yet another point for Williams. And of course, he's all set and primed to be Hamilton's teammate in 2022, where I think his career is really going to take off. So, driver standings with 7 races to go. Lewis Hamilton has reclaimed the points lead. It has been a back and forth affair between him and Verstappen this year. The gap is 2 points. 2 lousy points. Then you have Valtteri Bottas with 151. Lando Norris, again, what could have been? In 4th position with 139. Sergio Perez is 5th with 120. You have the Ferrari boys in 6th and 7th at 112.5 for Sainz and 104 for Leclerc. Daniel Ricciardo 8th in points, 95. Pierre Gasly in 9th with 66 points. And Fernando Alonso rounding out the top 10 with 58 total points. Constructor Standings. Mercedes extends their lead in the Constructor Standings over Red Bull to 33 points with 7 races to go. So even though the Drivers' Championship is a little bit in doubt, it seems like they've really gotten a hold on the Constructor Championship, at least right now. McLaren's continue holding down the 3rd position in the Constructor Standings. They have an 18.5, well, they have a 17.5 point edge over Ferrari. Then you have Alpine in 5th with 103. AlphaTauri with 84. Aston Martin with 59. Williams with 23. Alfa Romeo now with 7 points, thanks to Kimi Räikkönen earning 4 points today with his 8th place finish. And Haas continuing to bring up the rear as per the usual. Still has not scored a singular point. I don't think they've ever scored any points. And if they have, it's pretty much a goddamn miracle that they did so. As for my final rating for the Russian Grand Prix, I mean, boy, after 3 straight races of absolute bullshit and boring shit, this was a refreshing change of pace. Absolute crazy race, ridiculous strategies. There was actually quite a bit more passing than there was in the Italian Grand Prix, at least it felt that way. An absolute incredible battle between 2 British drivers and Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris for the race win. Weather playing a crazy factor near the end, and Lewis Hamilton nabbing his 100th career win. This was an absolutely incredible race. So, my final rating for the Russian Grand Prix, some of you might be surprised by this. I am going to give this race a 9 on the fuel gauge. It was that good. It was that much of an enthralling race. I enjoyed it. I would wholeheartedly recommend rewatching it. Of course, if you have a subscription to Formula1.com, Formula 1 TV, you can rewatch it anytime you want. I would recommend rewatching this race because it's just absolute insanity. It's absolute insanity what went on in this race, and it was enthralling. It absolutely was, from start to finish. From Hamilton having that terrible start at the beginning, having to recover from it, having to, battle through a DRS train, coming out behind Lando Norris to try to battle for the win, then the rain coming at the end, just throwing everything into flux. It was just an absolutely incredible race. Definitely one of the best Formula 1 races of the year, and one that I would wholeheartedly recommend going back and watching, especially considering the historic ramifications that this race now has, with Lewis Hamilton becoming Formula 1's first ever Centurion. A feat that we might not see again for a long time to come. But that is going to do it for today's edition of The Fuel. I don't think I'm going to be doing a Cup review because the Cup race starts at 7 and the green flag's not until 7:19. And even though it's only a 400-mile race, more than likely it's not going to get done until between 10:30 and 11 p.m. And I go to bed at around midnight because, I get up for work early in the morning. So you're probably not going to see a Cup Series review on Las Vegas until tomorrow, in all likelihood. But, it's not really that big of a deal, honestly. Because, trust me, I waited until 2 weeks after the fact to do the Italian Grand Prix, so I can wait a little bit. But considering that it is the playoffs and Talladega is next week as well for the Cup Series, I will try to get the Las Vegas review in tomorrow, whenever I can, whenever I get off work. Try to get everything set up and all that other shit. Because it actually takes a bit to get all the stuff that you see on screen set up. From the pictures and all that other good stuff. But I think it's worth it because it gives you, all the information that you would ever want for a review. I might end up changing the layout for next season, and then having a second screen for like results and points and all that other good stuff. But we'll see. But that's going to do it for this edition of The Fuel. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the Packerman signing out. See you later.
Thank you for watching tonight's video. Be sure to like and subscribe, you rats!